Hey, Teresa.
Gotta wait for a second.
Hi, how are you?
There we go. I think we're good.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
I can't. Yeah,
Perfect, perfect. Well, hey, thanks for joining the call today. I really appreciate it. It's kind of interesting how you meet people on LinkedIn and then you want to learn more about them and you find like-minded people, and it's just I think these calls are really great to have because if something good comes from it, if we have a good back and forth, it's something that I think both of our audiences on LinkedIn would enjoy hearing. And so
Mhm.
that's what I try to do is I try to have these little informal conversations. And when I started doing this about 2 months ago, one of the guys that I was having the call with, he said, "Dave, are you recording this?" And I said, "No, I'm not. I didn't even think to do that." He goes, "Oh, you should have recorded it because that was golden what we just that exchange for 2 minutes." So
Right.
I just like that to, the record button's on. We're going to have a nice conversation. And then what I'll end up doing is I'll take this whole conversation, I'll post it up on our YouTube channel, and then I'll take little snippets out. If we've got a couple of good moments, I'll put that
Sure.
up as content on LinkedIn in a sort of a 90-second clip. And then I'll tag you in that so that you can see that and you can share that with your group as well. And
Mhm.
so what was interesting when I went to your profile, there was a couple of things that really struck me. One was your fitness background.
Oh,
Um, 15 years at Good Life, which is awesome. And so that right away, if you've read my background at all, I have an affinity to fitness as well.
yes.
So that was in common. But then the whole talk about emotional intelligence, I think,
Mhm.
is really interesting because as a speaker, and I know that's one of the things that your that business that you're developing, quite often you're told pick a lane and stick in the lane. One of the struggles that I've had over the last say 6 years is trying to decide which of those lanes works best for me.
Mhm.
Because in wellness, you can go in so many different directions.
Mhm.
And every time you get exposed to another situation and you just want to scream from the rooftops, this stuff, what ends up happening is you end up scaring a bunch of people and they go, "Ooh, don't talk to that guy. He's nuts." Or my wife's the best. She'll say, "Please don't get him started on sugar. Just don't. You won't get those hours back." And so it's kind of a funny place that we're in, and that's why I was so keen to talk to you, is because I just wanted to learn more about emotional intelligence, and how sort of what the lane is that you've picked for yourself as a speaker and as a coach, and how you sort of stay true to that lane when you could be solving 15 problems, but really you want to stick to one. So let's start with your definition, because I heard that the other day and I thought it was fantastic.
It's kind of interesting because it depends who you ask sometimes what their definition of emotional intelligence is. And even if you're a practitioner of emotional intelligence, it almost even depends on which model of emotional intelligence you practice or follow with your clientele. So, one of my favorite things about life is you have this great opportunity to absorb information from all of these sources. And, Travis Bradbury writes about emotional intelligence and works for Gallup, and Joseph Stein is the author of the book that goes with the EQI model that I am a practitioner of. And then Daniel Goleman's like the godfather of emotional intelligence. So I've read all of their books, and I've watched videos from other people that talk about emotional intelligence and are coaches and practitioners. And I love Marcus Buckingham and I love Simon Sinek. And I just think these people have all of this insane intelligence around life and leadership. And Oprah's been a great teacher, and Maya Angelou. So my definition really comes from absorbing from other people and then putting it into the application of my life. And what I think emotional intelligence really is, it's knowing yourself first and understanding your emotions to a depth that allows you to understand and see emotions in other people, using that as information to cultivate exceptional interactions in which you work together to solve a common goal.
So what's really interesting there for me is when you talk about knowing yourself first, what I found is that for people like you and me, we are very introspective. We look at these sort of long-term grandiose big pictures, these visions, and that comes easy to us. Whereas I find people who are a little more pessimistic and a little more challenged emotionally in some regards, they have a really tough time looking inward and even visualizing what next week is going to look like, let alone a year from now or 5 years. And they get sort of angry with you if you try to push them and try to nudge them to do that. So I actually tried to go through a start with why experience or experiment with my wife, which may or may not have been a good thing. but I got her really angry, and it really did, it dawned on me that, we're all different. Mm-hmm. We're all at this different level of emotional intelligence, and not that anyone's better or worse than the other, but I do find that people who are opportunists or people who are pessimists, they tend to be on different spectrums, and I find that the pessimists in particular really are challenged to look forward and look in towards themselves. Have you experienced anything similar to that with the people you coached?
Well, so we could say the opposite of pessimism is optimism, right? And most people are quite familiar with hearing that. And optimism is one of the 4 horsemen for well-being. And well-being indicator can also be called happiness. Mm-hmm. So when we think about people who show up with a high level of well-being, or generally we see them and we think to ourselves, that person seems really happy. Like life is working for them. Mm-hmm. That when we see that, there are things that they do, like you're mentioning, that they reflect on their life experiences, and they can look at them both subjectively and objectively. And when they look at them objectively, they see their role that they play in the interactions that they experience, in the decisions that they make. And when they do that, they're able to grow and expand their knowing of themselves. When you approach life with a pessimism, your overall well-being or even happiness indicator is suppressed. And because it's suppressed, the ability to look at things from the objective manner is really quite difficult. And sometimes that's the space you have to start in with emotional intelligence development, is helping people to peel away the armor they're wearing that's preventing them from doing that.
Do you have a definition for happiness?
I've never been asked that question before, and I don't even know if I've really thought about what is my definition for happiness. I think more for me, I don't think this is funny, but maybe in this moment I'm thinking, well, it's really funny. My definition is more of a feeling.
Okay.
I know when I'm happy, and I can see the indicators for other people when they're happy, and you can also see when people are wearing the disguise of happiness.
So here's a good one for you to look into. You're familiar with Sean Achor at all and his works,
No.
The Happiness Advantage? He's a Harvard researcher. He's got a great TED Talk out there, but he did a talk at Google. So look, his name is Sean Achor, Achor, and just look up his talk at Google. It's a really fun talk. And at the end, he gave a definition for happiness that absolutely changed my life. So for me, one of my struggles until I crossed my first Ironman finish line, I was searching for happiness because just there were so many things not playing out in my life the way that I thought they would. Yes, I had a healthy family. Yes, I had my 2 kids. Yes, my wife and I get along great. All those things are great, but these things that were supposed to make us happy in life weren't. And my health was suffering because I was always chasing these things. And
right.
When I crossed my first Ironman finish line, I had this thought that, eventually I would do this thing. I would feel so good about myself. I'd feel so happy. And immediately I crossed the finish line. Within 5 seconds, my next thought was, how could I do that better? 14 hours, huh? How can I do that better? That was crap. I got to do better. And I didn't realize what had happened until I heard this definition from Sean Achor. And what he said was, when we put success together with happiness, and we measure success with happiness, we never allow our brains to get there. We're always sort of pushing our brains over the cognitive horizon because success just represents momentary pleasure. Where happiness is and should be the joy you feel striving for your full potential every day. And when I sat back and thought about that, I went, wow, you know what? All these steps, all these days added together that got me to race day and that have propelled me forward ever since, I've just found the joy and the happiness in the training. And if you look, like if I look back at myself, I've been that type of person. Whatever sport I played, I always loved the practice. I love the repetition. Maybe that's why I love doing Ironman, is because there's so much practice and repetition that get you to the game day. But I started really just experiencing and embracing the joy I felt every day for being at my full potential that day. And all of a sudden my life turned around, and I was able to share happiness, because it was no longer about, you know, getting a time that was going to qualify me to get the Kona, to go to the world championships, to do this, to do that. It was like, no, just, you know, define what happiness looks like to you, and go, you know, what is the vision you have for your future, and how can you feel really good about taking another step every day towards that vision, you know, making that vision your reality. So no, when I asked the question about happiness, I just wondered if you had a definition, because that one really was a life changer for me. So
when I describe it to other people, like I have an internal methodology towards happiness, and knowing that my happiness comes from the inside. It comes from really believing in my strengths as an indicator of the things that I'm exceptionally good at doing, but also they fill my cup, because they are the things, as you called it, that play to all of my potential. And so when I'm in that arena of life, or those arenas of life, I'm able to show up as the best version of myself. And even when I place myself in moments of challenge towards things that potentially might be a weakness, or things that I'm not really good at, if they are items of passion and interest of mine, I still find happiness in the challenge of trying to overcome something that I might not be good at yet. Or if I'm...
Growth mindset.
Yeah, right.
The power of yet.
The power of yet. If I am also embarking in weaknesses of things that I have no interest in or no passion in, however they would serve an outcome, potentially making more money, getting something materialistic, I may never find happiness or joy in doing it, because it's not serving an internal purpose for potential. It's serving an external pursuit, as you called it. So when I work with people and their well-being indicator is the one that's really struggling, we often start with self-regard, understanding that arena, and what are you playing to most of the time? Are you playing to your strengths or your weaknesses, and passions and interests, or things that drag you down? And so we try to eliminate and avoid the things that drag them down, that really plagues their ability to be happy. And then we start to look at things like self-actualization. So that is, if I know my strengths, it's working on relevant activities that grow my strengths. So am I constantly pursuing learning and growth for my potential? And then, do I have an optimistic outlook? Because when I'm trying to grow, I will be met with things that challenge me. And if I don't think that the future is hopeful, I likely won't have an optimistic outlook. And optimism equates to success generally. And then the last one is interpersonal relationships. So I have to be able to leverage connections with other people to ultimately be happy. The core of human need is connection.
So it's interesting, because I agree with everything you're saying, and I think you and I are part of the choir. And the challenge becomes, how do you talk to people who aren't in the choir? And I think of one individual that I know very keenly, and they're stuck in a position where they've got poor management. They're not getting the feedback that they're getting is terrible. And it's a top-down negative sort of feedback coming from their company. And so this individual that I know is very stressed out, because they can't even motivate themselves to check off one of the 100 things that have to get done today to help them be successful in their day. And it becomes so overwhelming, they just give up and get depressed. And they find the motivation really hard to move forward. And I just wonder, in your practice, how you deal with people like that who are emotionally stuck. I know for me, what I try to do is I try to look at what is one box that I can tick for them and say, here's a step forward. Like I learned that about the Ironman, is that you don't get there by just giving it on race day. There are 1,000 boxes that need to get ticked, and you tick them off one at a time. And so that's how I decompartmentalize sort of helping people who are stuck. How would you help somebody who is emotionally stuck, maybe a little borderline depressed, going, this just sucks. This work environment sucks. Management's toxic. I'm a disengaged employee looking for another job. And he's somebody who could be turned around quite easily, but not getting the right direction from management. And just how would you, if you were a consultant going into that situation, because we see it all the time in many corporations, disengaged employees, like 87% of the workplace, based on the recent Gallup poll from 2018, says that 87% of employees are disengaged and actively disengaged at work. So like, how do you tackle that with
it's a distressing number, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So I tackle it in essence of remembering the power of questions, because when someone starts to tell their story, it can be very easy to jump in with solutions. And my job is not to fix it. My job is to guide you towards the 20% that you pick that gets you the 80% of where you want to be. And when people are under a mountain of discomfort, you cannot ask them to look at the mountain. You have to be able to ask them to narrow in on what is the one thing that's getting in your way of stepping outside to actually see the mountain. So if I'm buried under it, I can't even see the top. And if you can help people, what I try to do when they're buried in that depths of whatever might be plaguing them, all of those things that you mentioned, the first thing I ask them to do is to be able to identify, if you were to be able to step outside of yourself for a moment and look at yourself as a third-party participant, what would you see? And generally, the first thing that comes out of their mouth is the thing that they're most emotionally connected to, and is often the hardest thing for them to acknowledge. And that is usually the goal that you start with, right? So whether they say something like, I feel like I'm so stressed out, I can't even begin to think about what's going on. Then it's kind of like, well, let's get your stress under control. And let's start to look at not the things that are stressing you out, but how do you manage your stress? And the 3 pillars of like exercise, nutrition, sleep. Like you start with things that sound so fundamental, but that's it. They are fundamental for a reason. And
that can be so foreign to people, because when you are stressed out, you're not sleeping right, you are not eating right, and you're not exercising.
You're also fighting the fact that you need to take care of yourself because you have all of this other shit, for lack of a better word, that you feel like you need to be taken care of. And if you step outside and go, I'm going to take care of me first, you have all of this internal dialogue going, you're so selfish. When the reality is, if I don't take care of myself, I cannot take care of anything else.
Yeah, no, you're 100% true on that and accurate. So yeah, I find that a lot of consultants, a lot of speakers, a lot of coaches try to focus on the high level view of things, and I don't do that. I'm like, I want to make, like Teresa, we made one connection here today, one at a time. I know it sounds silly, but I like to think that using a tool like LinkedIn and having conversations like these can help to leverage this struggle that people have so that they don't feel so all alone. And that's the one thing that I notice that spirals people into depression, is that this overwhelming feeling of they're the only person on the planet that's ever had this problem, that's struggling from this, and they're not. So helping people feel like they're not alone. But then, to your point, we can't fix people, but we can support them. And if you can find one small step forward, I use a journal. This is kind of funny. I have this big thick journal. It's like, for people who are old enough to remember, it's like a phone book. And this is something that I use, and it incorporates a lot of great mentors that I've had in the last 10 years. Some of their practices of just creating a daily mantra, having gratitude, writing 3 grateful things, or 3 things you're grateful down for every day. Journal 1 positive experience. Do all those sort of emotional connections. But what's really important is I've got a to-do list on there, and the 5 things on the to-do list aren't what you would think are traditional. Hey, I've got to exercise today. I've got to get to work on time, do this report, blah, blah, blah. No, the 5 things are, what are the 5 things that are going to take you one step closer to being the person who you really want to be? What is your vision? And so that, because those things, a year can go by, a decade can go by, and this is where regret creeps in. You go, boy, I wish I had just done a little bit every day, and maybe I would be in a different place today. And so for me, that's the little steps. What are 5 little boxes I can check off today that have taken me one step closer to where I want to be? So that's one of the tools that I use. Do you journal at all? Do you use any kind of tracking system to help people at all with their emotional intelligence?
Each person will be different, and the strategies that work for them have to play into something that they can not just commit to, but they can make that resonates with them. It works for them. It's part of sort of their chosen repertoire of skills. I've done journaling in the past. I've done mindfulness practices in the past. I do meditation in not a formal way of meditation. I find meditation works best for me when I'm doing the dishes or when I am running. Usually, sometimes, when you get in the flow of sometimes physical exercise, you no longer have to pay attention to what you're physically doing or even your environment, and that allows your mind to kind of go free. Mm-hmm. I've done these kinds of things as in the moment that they worked for me and I needed them, but I've actually never held on to something consistently except exercise. Exercise has been the one constant that always works for me.
So there's a great book out there by James Clear called Atomic Habits. Mm-hmm. And the one, have you read the book?
No.
So it's a great book. It's an expansion on Charles Duhigg's work on the habit theory or something like that. But anyway, he's really good at analogies and stories in the book to help bring habits into daily practice. And one of the lines that he gave, which I really love, is that your habits just serve as proof of the identity of the person you aspire to be. Mm-hmm. So that's how you take a goal of saying, like when I said I wanted to be an Ironman, mm-hmm. I immediately went out and got a game plan in place. And as soon as I took that first step, I said, I'm an Ironman. I'm assuming the identity of things that Ironmen do every day. Therefore, I am an Ironman. And race day will just be another box to check. That's box 100 to check out of 100 boxes. And it's really interesting because when you start developing a body of proof, as I call it, you start to assume a new identity. And for people who are stuck, if you can ask them, well, so what are some of the habits that you do every day? Give me some of the main habits. Oh, do you go to Tim Hortons for breakfast? Or do you, whatever the 5 things might be that are your most consistent habits, think to yourself, say, okay, if you keep doing this for mm-hmm. 10, 20, 30 years, where is that going to take you? Do you read a food label every day? That might be a fun, consistent habit to start doing. And if you start building up this evidence of proof in the journal, and that's why people have said, Dave, do this thing, as an app on the phone. And I could do that. I've got people who develop apps, but this to me is very tangible. And yes. I can flip through it, and I can highlight it, and I can thumb through it, and I can look at something that I've highlighted from this day back on March 15th. What was I feeling? And it's just this body of proof. So yeah, it's just journaling. I wanted to ask you about journaling because I just thought that would be something that you would be using in your repertoire. But it works for me, but it doesn't work for everybody, for sure.
Right. So when I trained for my first marathon, I journaled because it was my first experience. And so I needed to be able to know what worked, what didn't work, and reflect on it and have an accountability measure as well. Mm-hmm. But once I was done my first marathon, it was ingrained. So my natural characteristics and tendencies push towards high discipline. So once I do something on a regular basis, it is part of my dynamic, and I can release the tools that I needed to create the habit, and it's just part of who I am after that. So for people, when I'm coaching them, journaling is one of those things. There's sometimes a negative connotation to journaling. So I use it as exercise based, and I just ask them, can you grab a notebook, like a small notebook, whatever. And I want you to start cataloging things like at 9 a.m., 12 p.m., 3 p.m., 6 p.m. I just want you to write stop. And for 10 minutes, I would like you to think about what are the physical things I feel in my body. So for example, do I feel a knot in my stomach, tension in my shoulders? Do I feel hot? Do I feel cold? What do I feel? And just catalog your physical manifestations. Now, once you catalog that, I want you to think about what emotion you're experiencing in the moment. And if you can name the emotion, eventually what we start to see is we start to connect physical manifestation to emotions. And part of emotional intelligence growth is being able to identify the physical state and be in tune with your body all the time, because your emotions represent themselves physically before you can logically think about them. And if we close that gap of, oh, I'm always in tune with my body, that'll mean you're always in tune with your emotions, which means you have much better control over your emotional state, and you're not emotionally hijacked. You're not emotionally triggered. You notice triggers at the subtle nuances of them so that you can deploy a strategy that helps you to minimize its explosion, and then you can continue to think logically through that emotional state. And so journaling or cataloging or using paper and pen as an exercise is really quite effective, and I use it quite often. I mean, I use a notebook for everything. It's my way of putting what's in my head down on paper.
Yep.
To physically have it, right? Whether it's I want this story to go in the book that I'm writing, and I'll just put it here until I put it where it needs to go. And then I'm like, oh, this is an idea for a video I want to do. Yep. Oh, I have a course I'd like to run, a free seminar. What am I going to put in the seminar? And so I use a notebook, which I guess you could call a journal.
Yep. So it's I love these conversations because I think, again, we're very like-minded, and I think the real benefit to people are people who don't think like you and I. If they can just glean one or two things from these kinds of conversations. Now, in saying that, I know that you have a coaching business and that you want to be found on LinkedIn, and that you want people to come to you to help you so that you can help them solve their challenges. Where can people find you on LinkedIn? Where can people find you on the web? How can we get a hold of you?
Well, LinkedIn's pretty easy. You search Teresa Quinlan, you'll see my face, you'll see emotional intelligence and the tagline. And so you can certainly connect with me there. My website is iqeqtq.com, which means, well, intelligence quotient, emotional quotient, Teresa Quinlan, or talent quotient. And Teresa at iqeqtq is another way to also get in touch with me. You could just send me an email. One of the things you had also mentioned was your ability to chip away at the future self you want to be is first having the vision in place of what that is. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the times people's ability to manage what are the 5 things I'm going to do today is based on knowing what that is.
Yep.
I find a lot of people really do struggle with who is it that I am and who is it that I want to be. This is the power of our storytelling, the power of being connected on LinkedIn, the power of having conversations with people, the power of showing up authentically and telling your story is other people get to see their reflection in you and go, oh, I was there. And look, you got out. And this is how you got out, or you got through, or you became who it was that you wanted to be. And a couple of the things that you're saying really, I think, could work for me. So I'm going to take note of what you said in your story and the things that you did to get out. And I'm going to try those things. Yeah. And all of a sudden we have a community or a human race that is so used to telling their stories. And this is, in essence, growing an entire planet of emotionally intelligent people.
So the funny thing for me is that I view LinkedIn as this social media platform that's a little bit different than Instagram or Facebook, where people are more or less just sort of showing off and look at me, live my life, blah, 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 feel bad about yourself because I'm awesome. In my world, I believe that LinkedIn, first and foremost, was created as an opportunity for people to network and find jobs. And I think that the first place people go if you're a professional, and when I say that, most white-collar people would kind of consider LinkedIn to be a professional website. If you are looking for something else, a new job, that means you're disengaged at work with where you currently are. And I think conversations like this can help those kinds of people. Maybe they can find a future where they are. They just haven't really stepped back and thought about things in the way that we're talking about them, which is really interesting. So I look at LinkedIn as this opportunity to help a certain group of people. And by connecting with HR managers, when you look at certain HR managers, they're connected with people who want to work for them, or who have tried to connect with them so they can network with them so they can find a job. So I think these kind of conversations are ones that are almost hard for HR managers to have, because they've got to be really careful about what they say, and there's always corporate rules. But I love being sort of the Jamie Oliver of the world, where I can go, you know what? I'm not hired by anybody. I'm not employed by anybody. I can say what I want, and it is what it is. And you're going to like it or not. You can hit the off button and turn it off anytime you want. But if you like what you're listening to, or you like what you're hearing, hey, here I am. I like that kind of approach because I'm a human, you know, you're a human, I'm a human, and we put our pants on the same way as anybody else does every day. And, you know, we struggle the same, but we're so afraid to share our struggles. And, you know, I think for me, I mean, I've learned in the last year how to grow this community. And I simply reach out to HR managers every day, and I invite them to connect with me. And I say, hey, look, have a look at what I put out there. If it resonates with you and you want to learn more, let's stay connected. And then I try to cultivate, you know, try to pick my lane and try to cultivate on a daily basis information that's going to resonate with them. And I'm still playing with that. I looked at your website, or sorry, at your activity page on LinkedIn, and I think you've got some great stuff going on. And all I would suggest is, if you want to grow your audience, look at inviting people who, like for me, it's HR managers. So I do a search on HR managers, and that's who I connect with. And that might be the same for you. And this is why this might be a good platform to share, because the people who are watching this are the people who you want to connect with as well. So everybody out there, connect with Teresa. But yeah, I mean, I think it takes a group of like-minded people to get together and have real conversations to help other people. And it's all giving, you know. So anyway, I appreciate you taking the half hour today to talk with me and to share a little more about emotional intelligence and how you're serving your customers by coaching them with emotional intelligence. Let's stay connected. I will definitely pay attention to what you put out, and if you like things that I'm putting out, certainly, you know, same thing, comment, like, whatever. But when you do that, know that when you comment on somebody else's post, you're engaging with their entire community. Because anybody that's seeing that into their community, right, that's the power of LinkedIn, is it keeps expanding, expanding, expanding. So make sure you always mention somebody in your post if you want to get into their network feed. And you know, just a great way to share your message. So
yeah, one of the things I rarely do is a reaction. I rarely do a like or a love or a thought, like the emoji. If when something strikes me within LinkedIn and postings, I always comment and add information or add my thoughts or share part of the story. I don't have this habit of just going, yeah, that was good, because it's unquantifiable feedback. Like if I liked it, I'm going to tell you what it was that I liked about it, so that can serve you and the audience to expand not just the dialogue, but maybe even just expand your own sort of appreciation of, look, this was really value added to the community. Mm-hmm. When you talked earlier about, you know, what kind of lane do you sort of stay in for emotional intelligence, there isn't a lane. There isn't sort of like a singular client that can benefit from emotional intelligence. There isn't a singular application for emotional intelligence. So while I do get asked quite often, like, what's the lane you want to stay in for emotional intelligence? I always say there isn't. I don't have a particular lane. I don't particularly care for limiting the applications of it. So if someone comes to me and says, I want to do this and accomplish that, how can emotional intelligence help? Well, I'll tell you if it can or if it can't. And then when it does, because it almost always does, then we start working on those skills that you need to execute what it is that you want to execute. You can be an individual who's struggling with self-confidence. You could be an individual who works for a company who is that has practices that are elevating your stress. You could be a whole company that's experiencing catastrophic disengagement and you need an organizational transformation. Emotional intelligence and I can do all of that.
So there was a really good post that I saw not too long ago from Gary Vaynerchuk, and have you heard of the $1.80 strategy that he coined?
No.
So basically what he said was, there's a lot of people out there trying to create content on LinkedIn or on many social media platforms, and they're creating a lot of really bad content. But he said, what you can do is, you know, if you can give your 2 cents worth as a really relative, thoughtful comment in the industry that you want to be targeting, do that 90 times a day. That's your $1.80's worth of investment of your time. But it was, you know, that stuck with me because there are so many people who just don't know what to put on as far as content. But these content creators are starving for people to comment and engage. So be the person that comments and engages. And again, people will see you everywhere as that person who is thoughtful and intelligent, and not just, yeah, liking and blah, 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 blah. No, I will, if I like something, I'll like it, but I'll always comment. I'll always, and that might, hey, that might take 5-10 minutes out of my day, but I think it's worth it because that person, that person really spent the time to create something they thought was of value. And if it's stuck with me, then I'm going to reach out and say, hey, this was good, and this is why I thought it was good, or I disagree, and this is why this is my point of view, and let's have an intelligent conversation.
Yeah, all of our behaviors align with our intention, right? So if our purpose is to put out content to help people just grow and know more, and an opportunity for them to do better, share the wealth of that knowledge and experience, then it doesn't matter if people like it or comment on it, because you're just putting it out there to align with your intention. Sometimes when you put on your business hat, then you're also looking at, who do I need to engage with this to help with the business sides of things? And that's one of, I don't think the struggles, but I think that's one of the understandings of solopreneurs or entrepreneurs, is you have to wear both hats with the same intention. Like your purpose is aligned and you do things for a variety of reasons. And when people ask you why you're doing things, you need to be transparent. Say, I do them because I want to share content, grow the community, grow the knowledge. And I'm also doing it because I'm growing my business and I need clients. That's just is what it is.
It's funny because, as a speaker, which I know you are, what you want to do is you should be, what I do is we want to be happily sharing what we know, because we know that it's not the individual out there that's going to bring us in as a speaker. It's the corporate executive, the HR manager is going to bring us as a speaker. And if they like what they keep hearing, they recognize that, hey, most of my employees probably haven't heard this before, so it'll be new to them. So keep giving good stuff, and good stuff will come back to you eventually. So no big secret there. But Teresa, listen, thank you very much for your time today. This was a true pleasure, and looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Me too. Thanks so much, Dave. It's great to meet you.
Thanks, Teresa. Okay, have an awesome day.
You too.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.